This programme was made with the support of the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland.
Over the years, many Irish missionary sisters have done Trojan work among disadvantaged communities in Africa. This is a few of their stories, the stories of unsung Irish heroines in Africa.
It was plenty of hard work, I have to tell you, it really was. We had hospitals, you see, we were working in hospitals.
It was heavy work, hard work, and sometimes it would be all day long and sometimes into the night because you got emergencies and we were short of staff.
I was the only doctor, so I had to do everything that was needed, if you like.
You'd get lots of children coming with malnutrition, measles, diarrhea and vomiting, malaria.
Malaria big time. It takes so many deaths, especially in the ages between 6 months and 24. It's a real killer.
People were so poor, they didn't come to hospital until they really had to. They would go to local practitioners, etc. They would spend their money that way, and then they would have no money when they'd come into the hospital, and they'd be afraid they wouldn't be seen. And of course we'd see them.
We got the medicines, and as the medicines improved, we would get them. And we would be able to give the children.
And we wanted to ensure that the children were getting the food. We knew the adults would get the food, but we wanted to make sure the children would.
Later, many years later, we left these medicines in the village with a little committee who would give the child the medicine quickly when they got the fever.
It was around the women and children, and I suppose that was always what we looked for in our healthcare, to try and do something for the women and children.
I'm Paul Wright and welcome to the 6th programme of Unsung Irish Heroines in Africa. Many Irish women in Africa down the years have worked in the medical field. Hilary Lyons, Holy Rosary missionary sister and medical doctor, helped to run the Sarabu Mission Hospital in Sierra Leone, West Africa, from the 1950s to the 1990s. So what kind of medical cases did Hilary have to deal with on a daily basis?
Malaria big time. It takes so many deaths, especially in the ages between 6 months and 24. It's a real killer, and it's a heartbreak. It was a heartbreak then for us, because you'd see a child today and he'd be beautiful, 6 months, and next week he's gone, and we couldn't figure how could a healthy child be gone like that. Then began the long road to help the women to prevent it. They're trying bed nets now, mosquito nets, but in those days we hadn't thought of it because they didn't have the money anyway, and they didn't have that type of bed, and most babies slept on the floor. So we got the medicines, and as the medicines improved, we would get them. And we would be able to give the children. Later, many years later, we left these medicines in the village with a little committee who would give the child the medicine quickly when they got the fever. That was one of the big killers. The others were measles, polio, tetanus. Tetanus was horrible. They got it newborn, and then in those days we didn't know what to do with it, because there was no cure really, and it would break your heart, because a newborn baby, a beautiful baby, would start this terrible lockjaw and muscles all tight and trembling, and oh dear me, it was dreadful to look at. And so we used to do everything, and in a later book I think I have described how we actually gave chloroform to stop the spasms, and we worked on it anyway. Later years then, immunisation came, and that became the big thing, to sell immunisation, to say you will not get it, it's not being cured, it's not the drama, of being cured. At the beginning, the pressure and the stress was from tackling things I hadn't done before, without another sister doctor or any doctor of any size, shape or colour to discuss it with. And the real big problems were, one day they brought me in a man whose arm was shattered by a gunshot wound, where the gun went off accidentally. And all I remember from the books was that this could be a situation for gangrene, and I did a guillotine amputation as quick as anything. And I began to realise that in surgeries there's an awful lot of common sense once you're dealing with really simple, I don't mean simple, easy, but not complicated things. Well, anyway, I don't know, to ask his permission. I asked his family. You know, I said, I think this could be very serious, that he'll lose the arm and lose himself. So they said, go ahead, do your work. So I did, and then I sent him for a prosthesis. And since it was what we call a guillotine operation, it meant there was no great shape attached to it. But he came back and he said, oh, they said that the doctor sabbies her work very good, that this is a very nice stump. Could you have a nice stump? But anyway, that was the kind of thing. And then they came with big lumps in their belly or in their back or wherever, and I would see if it could be operated on. And if I thought it could, I did it. And then another time a woman came in and she said, I'm not pregnant, and she had a huge abdomen in front of her, and she wasn't pregnant. And I removed that, and it was very difficult. I had to get the nurse to hold up the tumour. It was so huge. She had a difficult post-op, but she made it. And of course people were saying, this now is the one, this is the one, and they liked the surgery. And then the caesarean sections, of course, we just were careful at the beginning to operate, to get their permission and explain to them the complications and the dangers.
Dr. Maura O Donoghue, a medical missionary of Mary, arrived into Ethiopia in the mid-1970s.
We would have a lot of outpatients to see. We would have a number of patients in the hospital, of course, and they would be medical, surgical, maternity, and children. And you just had to deal. I was the only doctor, so I had to do everything that was needed, if you like. And I remember one time there was a Haji who just lived across the river from us, and he got very, very ill, evidently. So he sent a message to know would I come to visit him. And I said, no, if he's that sick, he'll have to come into the hospital because we'll have to do tests, etc. And I don't want to go down and half treat him. He'll have to have tests, etc. So very reluctantly he came in. I think he was afraid because he was a Haji, different religion, etc., that we would discriminate, really. And when he came in, he was delighted. We were very good friends after that, really very good friends, and he went home well. But he brought in his own people to cook for him and everything. He really was nervous about coming in. I would have dealt with very difficult paediatric cases, children, young children who would come in with very high fever, with maybe severe dehydration, because people were so poor they didn't come to hospital until they really had to. They would go to local practitioners, etc. They would spend their money that way, and then they would have no money when they'd come into the hospital, and they'd be afraid they wouldn't be seen. And of course we'd see them.
We found that when we admitted sick babies, then the St. Joseph Sisters moved to Guinea. And when we had sick babies, then the mothers took them out of the cots and lay on the floor, because an African mother will never leave her baby away from her body.
Holy Rosary Missionary Sister Hilary Lines.
And we were less than impressed with that, because we had them all in one ward as the numbers grew, and they'd be all lying on the floor, and I'd be called to one sick one in the middle of the night with a bush lamp and saying, move over, shove, go the other way, I have to get into this one. And then we built a children's ward. And we got money. I wrote to the Pope. I didn't put Main Street, Rome, as someone said I did, but I didn't. And of course I never heard back. Until months later I got a big grant from Caritas International. And I think the Pope that time must have been, who was before?
George 23rd.
A major portion of the work of many medical missionaries is spent in training. Maura O Donoghue.
A lot of my time went in training the staff, because being one doctor in the hospital and for the outstation clinics, etc., it meant that the people who were there had to be able to do things that they normally wouldn't be expected of them, unless they were medically qualified. But I would have taken the responsibility for them, and I would train them, and I taught them to do various things. I remember at one stage, this was in Nigeria, we had 2 very good male nurses, and they were assisting me in the operating room. And I said, look, we have so many operations to do. I think I should. We only had spinal anaesthesia. We didn't have general anaesthesia. It was a remote rural area, and many years ago. I said, I would like to train you to do the spinal anaesthesia, to have the patient ready, anaesthetised for me when I finish one, so that I just have to get ready for the next operation and the patient is ready, to save time. So it was that kind of thing. A lot of time went into training others. In Ethiopia, there was one medically qualified woman in Ethiopia when I went out in 1973.
I left our own hospital, or leave it, but I made a choice to do that rather than stay. I felt that we would have a greater influence in the health of Sierra Leone, and so I opted for that, and that is true.
Holy Rosary missionary sister Mary Coleman.
It was teaching that person, the community health officer, and you're multiplying your efforts.
Influence, that's right.
Yes. So looking back, yes, but it wasn't always rosy, and when I was there it was difficult, because you didn't have the teaching staff and you didn't have the control which we had in mission hospitals. And, sometimes that, for me, who liked everything right and have it yesterday, yes, it stretched me.
Now, earlier in this programme, Dr. Maura O Donoghue, a medical missionary of Mary, talked about her medical work in Ethiopia. By the mid-1980s, famine engulfed much of Ethiopia, and Maura got deeply involved in famine relief work there.
I remember getting involved in a later famine in Ethiopia during my 14 years there, down in the southern part of the country. And I remember saying, there's an awful lot of talk, and the government is talking about famine down in the particular area. And I said, the Ministry of Health, the provincial minister or officer of health, asked me, would I do a nutrition survey? So I said, that would mean going out and staying out overnight. And by the way, where we stayed was something else. But anyway, I said we'd need to go out. And the parish priest, well, he wasn't a parish priest, the priest in the mission, he didn't have a parish, said, Maura, if you're going out there to that area, there is no petrol station. So you'll have to take enough fuel with you. And he said, if you get a puncture or something like that, what? And I said, if I get a puncture, I have a spare wheel, I can change it. So he said, yes, but if something else happens. I said, well, I get stuck. So he said, no, he said, I'll come with you. So we set off as a group of 4 people, I think, in the Land Rover. And we went, and one of the places, I don't remember, was the first night or what night it was, one of the places that we could stay at night was a little hut. And it was little, we took our beds, military beds, camp beds with us. But we saw this little hut and we asked, and some of the local people said, yeah, you can stay there tonight. But they had a hen coop over. So we were wakened very early in the morning with this cockerel crowing. But anyway, that was just part of it. That was just an aside. But I remember well going along to this village, and there was this child with an elderly man. And I don't know where the food came from, but there was food on the ground, some food on the ground. And the child was lying there, and he would have been maybe 3 or 4. He was looking at the food. He didn't have the energy to put his hand out to take it.
Wow. He was so gone.
Yeah. He had no energy whatever, no interest. And one of the things that we noticed when we were in the programme where we were monitoring the children, etc., was everything was so quiet. Everything, there was no, children usually make noise and they're playing and all the rest of it. No, nothing for the several weeks. And then one day we were in there and we were, weighing the children and checking them, etc. And the next thing, this child began to tap at a tin container that he had, making noise. And everybody stopped. We said, that's the first sign of real life,
Sister, how did your work go down that region in that later time in your time in Ethiopia?
It went very well. And the other thing is we were always combining, like we weren't exclusively involved in famine relief work. We always tried to combine it with development work and, as I said, training people, etc. And we had developed a primary healthcare program where we trained local people and gave them medical supplies, etc., after they were trained, when they'd got their certificates, and would supervise them. But we were under a communist regime. We were being monitored by the regime all the time, from the point of view of were we following the policy. So we were following the policy, but we realised that it wasn't the wisest, if you like, in the sense that they divided the people into what they called mahabars, which were associations, peasant associations in rural areas, and each association had to send so many for training every year. But there was no question about follow-up or seeing were they doing what they should be doing, or supervision or anything. So I went up to the Ministry of Health in Addis Ababa, and I said, we've been following your programme, etc., you see, for so many years. I said, wouldn't it be good to do an evaluation, see how it's going? Oh, see, we have a whole list of evaluations that we want to do, but we can't do it. We haven't the resources. So he went and he got a file and he said, look, this is the list. Where are you? I said, I'm staying in Addis for the weekend. He said, okay, you can take the file, but you'll have to take it back to me before you go. And now this was a communist regime allowing me to take a file out.
But you were going to do the work, and I'd say the gentleman, the opposite, recognised that.
So I came back and I said, look, we'd like to do this one. It was really to evaluate our primary healthcare programme, which we were doing under Ministry of Health policy. So we did that. We got one of the provincial Ministry of Health people to co-direct it with me. I asked him, would he assign him? So he did, from Addis. And, of course, he was delighted. And he had his name on the report, etc. So we did the report. We submitted it. We said that they should have a workshop to train all the Ministry of Health people in the province. And they said, but we haven't the funds for this. I said, I'll get the funds. But I said, in order to get somebody objective to look at the results of this, we'll have to get an outsider to come in. So I got somebody from India, from a primary health program in India, to come in and to evaluate the findings, if you like.
Obviously that ensured transparency and ensured that the money was properly spent.
And make the recommendations. The Ministry of Health took it on as a strategy afterwards. I realised, as I said earlier, there was no way I could do it alone, or even with the team of sisters who were with me. We would be totally inadequate. And it was a question of spreading the net and getting as many people in as possible to cooperate, who were very willing to cooperate. And I think that was, if I've ever done anything, I think that is probably the contribution I've made. You know, getting other people to do their bit.
And for those of you who've just tuned in, I'm Paul Wright, and you're listening to the 6th programme in our 8-part Unsung Irish Heroines in Africa series. The last speaker was Maura O Donoghue, a medical missionary of Mary, talking about her famine relief work in Ethiopia during the 1980s. Now, continuing with that interview, here's what Maura O Donoghue had to say about what motivated her in her work in Ethiopia.
People's needs, and I think it's the need that people have when they're in such desperate situations. You can't walk away from it, and you feel driven to do your best to try to alleviate, I think, that suffering, which it is, appalling suffering, knowing that you can't do everything, sure, but at least you can alleviate it. And I think that's what kept me going. I'd often say it to the local people, you know, we had our famines too, and we had recurring famine, you know. So we, I think, appreciate what it's like for you. But, you know, have hope. We've come through it. And at that stage, of course, it was the Celtic tiger.
The virtual tiger.
So we, you know, I said, I used to say, have hope, this will change, things are bound to improve.
Were there many other Irish people out there as well?
There were lots of Irish people out there. There was Goal, there was Concern, Trócaire. Trócaire had a lot of people there. You know, a lot of people in terms of supported a lot of programmes. Concern had people out there. Goal had people out there. In fact, one of the people that I worked with, one of the nurses that I worked with initially from Ireland, in one of the initial famine programmes, was a Goal person, a Goal nurse. And another thing, like I'll always remember this for John O'Shea, I was in the Secretariat and he called. Now, he visited, and it was his first visit to Ethiopia, and he was trying to get the hang of it, if you like. And I was giving him the whole background in as far as I knew it at the time. Now, I was a good few years there at the time, so I knew a fair amount about it. So I gave him a good bit of time. And he appreciated this, and he said to you know, I'd like to do something for you, Maura. He said, what could I do? And I said, oh well, I said what I need, I wouldn't be asking you for. In other words, it would be too much. He said, you need wheels, don't you? He saw that I was going around public transport or begging a lift here or there, you know. And he said, you need wheels, don't you? And I said, I do. He said, I'll have one I have one in Djibouti, I'll get it in here, he said, within the next couple of weeks.
That's fantastic, isn't it? Collegiate, it was not how out with you, I mean, and especially when...
I remember it for him, you know, like, because I didn't know him before, and he didn't know me either, you know, and then he sent out nurses, and I was able to get them placed in different places, you know. Well, I don't know how this woman in a post office in an area in Limerick City got my name. But she began to send me money. And I was coming home a couple of months after I got the first donation from her. And it was about 1,500 pounds at the time, which was, you know, a very substantial amount of money. And from a post office. So I went in, I went in to visit her, and I said, look, I'm very grateful. And I had written a letter, and she had the letter posted up in the wall of the post office for everybody to see. And I said, I'm so grateful, but I said, do you realise how much this means, you know? And she said, don't be thanking me. That's why I have the letter up, posted on the wall. She said, it's when people come in to collect their pensions or their social welfare, they put in their change into that box. Oh my God. And they sent me several of 1,500, 1,800, this kind of thing. And that they would put their change into the box. People are very generous though in Ireland. They really are very generous.
This programme was made with the support of the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland. Until our next number 7 programme in this 8-part Unsung Irish Heroines in Africa series, from myself, Paul Wright, bye for now.